The New York Rangers just shocked everyone as trade rumors continue to escalate. One insider has revealed that some players on the Rangers are not exactly thrilled with Chris Drury's change of direction, and one New York Rangers fan favorite could be making his way out of New York. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 70% of you who watch these videos are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want to do yourself a favor, it's free. Hit that subscribe button and you get to stay up to date with everything New York Rangers. And shout out to all 3,400 of you who are subscribed to the channel. I appreciate all the love and you guys watching all the videos and supporting the channel. I see your comments and I love the discussions that everyone gets into down there in the comments. But today there is some interesting stuff going on as Elliotte Friedman revealed on his 32 Thoughts podcast, and this was transcribed by Phil Kosher, that and quote, "I just think this whole thing with the New York Rangers has spooked teams. People are being really careful because they saw what happened to them and are saying we don't want that to happen to us. We saw how damaging that can be." And that was Elliotte Friedman on a shook trade market from his latest 32 Thoughts podcast. And he also went on to say that teams and managers are more reluctant to provide detail on their conversations because of how much of an impact the specific naming of Kreider and Trouba had on the Rangers and the market as a whole as a result of saying that last week. So obviously I was on the record last week saying that I thought it was a good thing that Chris Drury came out and said this because I thought it would galvanize the team and get them to play harder. That was not the case, and it really did something to the trade market, and naming these players really did something to the team. We saw Jacob Trouba, besides the Montreal Canadiens game, look like he was completely checked out and looked like he was done for the season, just the way he was playing, and that is the captain of your team. And we'll get to Jacob Trouba in another video. I have another video that's going to come out very, very soon on that specifically because there's some interesting things that came out about him and the captaincy as well, and I'll just tease it like that. But I think this is very interesting. I was quite surprised last week that GM Chris Drury came out and said, hey, we're shopping players. We need a shakeup, and these are the guys who are available. I thought that was a little bit shocking at the time. I thought it was something that was going to galvanize the team, and it certainly did not. So I thought that was very interesting. And then from Phil as well, two league sources have told them that the network, part of the USA Today network, that at least some players resent the for sale sign that Drury hung over his roster this early in the season and don't appreciate how easily it got leaked. And speaking of leaked, we can go back to last summer where the Jacob Trouba trade rumors got leaked somehow to Larry Brooks in the middle of everything right before Jacob Trouba's no trade list was due to be submitted. So I'm not sure why there's so many leaks going on, and the fact that that got out last week, I thought that was very interesting, especially the players being named. Again, I thought it was going to work in their favor. Clearly did not. They got back on track against the Montreal Canadiens, but they have a very tough game coming up tonight against the New Jersey Devils, who are ahead of them in the Metropolitan Division standings. But of course, the Devils have played a bunch more games. So they have the Rangers have a bunch of games in hand, which makes games like this very important. So I thought that was very interesting as well. And if we move to Chris Kreider a little bit, I want to touch on Chris Kreider because his name was obviously in there. It's going to be a lot harder to move a guy like Jacob Trouba because his play this season hasn't been good. We know that the Rangers everybody knows that the Rangers want to move off of this player and are probably going to in the offseason if they don't during the season. Chris Kreider is an interesting one. He's a very, very good player. He's had a good season so far for the New York Rangers, and I think he's a fan favorite amongst all Rangers fans. And if he were to be traded, that would be a huge adjustment period for fans. I think fans would be quite upset about that. But this is Elliotte Friedman again. He says that Chris Kreider does not have full move protection, which we went through in a couple of videos ago, and I think there would be interest. And I think there would be a lot of interest league-wide from some very interesting teams as well. And this is from James Finch on the Kreider Sabres idea that's floating around. I say this not knowing his no movement clause or no trade clause, the 15 teams that are in it. He doesn't know who's on them. But assuming that it does have Buffalo, he feels like other teams like Boston or St. Louis who are looking for a scoring forward would interest him more, to the point that I'd assume he'd block Buffalo. And usually with these no movement clauses and no trade clauses, it's all the Canadian teams and the Buffalo Sabres on them. So I think you can count for Buffalo being on that no trade clause, but or no trade list, I should say. But other teams like Buffalo and St. Louis is very interesting, or Boston, I should say, and St. Louis are very interesting because Boston absolutely needs scoring help. And when you look at a guy like Chris Kreider, at least this season, he's not going to get you any assists, that's for sure. But he's played 20 games so far. He has 9 goals. He's having a decent season, right? Again, he's playing on the power play a lot. He's getting power play points. Or goals, I should say. He has 0 assists so far this season. It's kind of funny, actually. Plays a lot. This is a guy who can play a lot. Again, he's a scoring threat. He's a shooter. This is a guy who scores a ton of goals and can score a ton of goals. He has in his career. He is getting a little bit older. So I don't think that the New York Rangers should trade this player. I really do not, because they have aspirations of a Stanley Cup this year. And I think trading a guy like this away, you probably get worse in doing that. But this is a guy that if they are going to trade him, if he is truly on the block, a lot of teams would be very interested in him. And I think the Boston Bruins are absolutely one of those teams, because they need scoring help this year. They need a lot of help in a lot of different areas, but they need help scoring. And there's been a lot of trade rumors around, obviously, him and Jacob Trouba, because his name was out there. And that's something that's hard to deal with, I think. And Chris Kreider came out and he had some interesting thoughts on everything that's happening. And he said, you know, we're 20 games into the season. Let's go through this, can't say that word, now, and figure out who we are. Let's go through this rough patch now and figure out exactly who we are as a team. We had the best regular season in the history of an Original Six franchise last year, won a President's Trophy, and didn't go as far as we would have liked. We're getting exposed right now. Our warts are out there, and teams are picking on the things we don't do well, and we've gotten away with gotten away from things we do well. And I think that was very interesting, because the Rangers have been giving up a lot of shots. Their team defense has been questionable at best. It's not just the defensive core, but their team defense and the commitment from the centerman and all 5 guys on the ice has been absolutely questionable. Shesterkin and Quick have kept them in games at times and won them games this season. So they do have to pick it up. But I thought that was interesting insight that, you know, let's go through it now. Let's, get going as a group here. We'll go through the adversity now instead of in the spring. And, well, we all like to think that way. Obviously, there's adversity in the spring. But, I thought this was interesting insight from Chris Kreider. And if you look at his J-Fresh start, like, this is a guy who is not going to get you any assists. But everywhere else, he's, decent, pretty average on defense, which is fine. I think you can be as a winger, especially an older winger, if you have a 92 percentile rating in offense. Like, this guy can absolutely score for you. I think trading him at this point would be a mistake. I think that the Rangers can turn it around with the right mindset. I just think that, what Chris Drury did and how that got leaked last week did affect their play clearly. But they can absolutely get back on track here. Leave November in the past. Let's get on the right track in December and keep playing hard and playing a brand of hockey that we know the Rangers to play. Let's get away from this unsustainable type of hockey and this, all these mental lapses this year. So last thing I'll mention in this video is from Vince Mercogliano, and he'll add this, that he has spoken to 2 sources who added that the New York Rangers are motivated in their efforts to make a trade sooner rather than later. And yes, Kreider and Trouba are the 2 names at the top of the for sale list. So whether they can pull it off or not is to be determined. Those are 2 gigantic names, first of all. And obviously, it's going to be quite difficult to move off of those 2 players because of the salary cap. And I think the emotional connection to Chris Kreider, the longest tenured New York Ranger to this point. So it's going to be very interesting. We could see Chris Kreider in another team's jersey. It could be the Boston Bruins, and that would be pretty heartbreaking for Rangers fans. But let me know in the comments what you think of, obviously, the ruckus that was made last week by Chris Drury, and if Chris Kreider is to be moved to Boston or another team. I think it would be heartbreaking for Rangers fans, but I wouldn't move off of him. I do think Jacob Trouba, we know he's not long to be a New York Ranger. He is going to be moved off of at some point, whether it's in season or at the end of this season. So I wouldn't be too mad with moving Jacob Trouba, but Chris Kreider, I think that'd be tougher. I think there's other contracts on the team that you want to try and move before his. But let me know what you think in the comments, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.